The FTC just screwed over car buyers, and dealerships will be the biggest winners here. Let me explain. Last year, the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, introduced a rule change proposal that would ban junk fees, bait-and-switch sales tactics, and non-transparent pricing for consumers. And this was not a dealership or automotive-specific piece of legislation, but instead targeted any industry where non-transparent pricing is a real issue. So things like hotels and hospitality, ticketing and events, as well as rental cars or apartments. FTC Chairwoman Lina Khan made a statement last year whenever this FTC rule change was introduced, and it perfectly sums up why we need a rule change in the first place. It's beyond frustrating to end up spending more than you budgeted because of random, arbitrary fees, she says. No one has ever felt that a convenience fee was convenient. Companies should compete to provide the best quality at the best price, not to see who can squeeze the most added expenses out of consumers. And well, I think that this is something that all of us can agree on, and all of us have been getting tired of it. Junk fees, convenient fees, whatever they're called in this specific situation, consumers are really tired of paying it. And truthfully, they have just gotten out of hand. Now, the FTC defines junk fees as a few different things: unnecessary charges for worthless, free, or fake products or services, unavoidable charges imposed on a captive consumer, and surprise charges that secretly push up the purchase price. So in the context of the automotive industry and dealerships, this could be things like required dealer add-ons. So things like anti-theft, tent, or even nitrogen in your tires. Basically anything that isn't the actual cost of the car itself, but is still required by the dealership, bringing that total purchase price through the roof. In addition to the items that I just discussed, there are a few very dealership-specific items as well that the FTC wants to address. For example, bait-and-switch claims. And according to the FTC, this proposal would prohibit dealers from making a number of deceptive advertising claims to lure in prospective car buyers. And this could include things like the cost of buying and financing a car, cost of add-ons and additional services, financing terms, as well as a slew of other false promises. And what the FTC is saying here is that dealerships use really deceptive advertising tactics to get people into the door. But once the consumer is in the door, none of these promises end up coming to fruition, and they're almost flat-out lies. But one of the biggest changes that could potentially come with this FTC rule would be require full upfront disclosures of costs and conditions. And this would require dealers to make key disclosures to consumers, including in providing a true offering price for a vehicle that would be the full price a consumer would pay, excluding only taxes and government fees. It would also require dealerships to disclose additional fees, dealer add-ons, and things like that. Now, these are a few of the different FTC rules that have been proposed and thrown around over the last year. We have the broad one that is really covering all of consumers in the different industries where these consumers are being targeted. So, for example, hotels, tickets, apartments, and dealerships. But on top of that broad FTC rule, there are also two dealership-specific rules as well. We have the Motor Vehicle Dealers Trade Regulation Rule as well as the Vehicle Shopping Rule. These are the more specific rules to the automotive industry, and these would also cover the different items that I just discussed. So things like bait-and-switch sales tactics, disclosures, transparent pricing, and more. Now, my feelings towards these FTC rule change is probably similar to many of your feelings as well. This sounds really great, and it's heavily needed in the automotive industry. Implementing a ban on junk fees, bait-and-switch sales tactics, and requiring dealerships to be more transparent about pricing is something that would benefit so many people. How many people get into astronomical, stupid car debt simply because they didn't fully understand what they were signing up for? And while there's really no way to know the exact number of people that would fall into this category, I would be willing to bet a huge portion. Because I personally have a hard time believing that anyone who understood personal finance and the true implications of buying a car would ever sign up for some of the deals that we see today. And as a result, I think that these dealerships that do these shady deals are really relying on the fact that people don't really understand what they're signing up for. So transparency and forced disclosures all the way around sounds like a great idea. And while I do think that it is the responsibility of the car buyer to do their due diligence and at least try to understand what they're signing up for, we also have to acknowledge the direction that the car market has been trending in the last 5 to 10 years. And obviously there are dealerships all around the country that are simply taking advantage of these buyers, the buyers that just don't know any better. And at what point does somebody look at the situation between dealerships and the consumer and say enough is enough, there is simply too much shady activity going on to be ignored? And that is what the FTC was, at least briefly, trying to do. Because with these FTC rulings, the FTC was trying to protect consumers from these shady dealership tactics. But in response to these FTC rulings, dealerships and dealership groups lost their mind. Dealerships and the National Automobile Dealership Association claimed that implementing these FTC rules would make it more expensive, more difficult, and more time-consuming to purchase a car. And that if the FTC actually wanted to protect car buyers and make the car buying process as easy as possible, they would simply stay out of it altogether. Yeah, because dealerships are already doing such a great job on this already. The public outcry from dealership groups was relatively swift. There was a lot of uproar around this time last year when the rules were first proposed and the public comment period was open, but it's been crickets for quite a while now. In fact, there has been virtually no updates for this FTC rule for about a year. In fact, I've been looking it up every few weeks to see if there were any new updates, and there hasn't been any. That was until this week. Because just the other day, Automotive News reported that the FTC proposed rule to ban junk fees might actually end up excluding car dealerships. And in the excerpt from Automotive News, it states, "Car dealerships, however, could be excluded if the FTC finalizes provisions on offering price and misrepresentation in its motor vehicle dealers trade regulation rule, or vehicle shopping rule, which was proposed in June of 2022. And it also seeks to ban junk fees and bait-and-switch advertising tactics in the car buying process." Now, on the surface, this isn't horrible news, because at least the FTC is trying to find ways to put these different rules and regulations into other, more dealership-specific rules, like the Motor Vehicles Trade Regulation Rule and the Vehicle Shopping Rule, which implemented should protect car buyers and should also provide many of the same protections as this more broad rule that the FTC is looking to pass sooner than later. But my concern is that if this broader FTC rule gets passed without dealerships being included, the National Automobile Dealer Association will do everything in their power to delay these other two, more dealership-focused rules from being passed. And thus, they will find their way out of any accountability and the rules will end up being tabled. Because you better believe that the National Automobile Dealer Association has been trying to do this over the last year, and they've been taking aggressive steps of preventing this rule from getting passed at all by supporting a bill that would force the FTC to redo the bill. And currently, the National Automobile Dealership Association is the third highest political donator in the automotive space, sitting right behind General Motors and Ford by donating $2.6 million this year alone and donating nearly $6 million last year. The fact is, dealerships and the National Automobile Dealer Association will do everything in their power to prevent these rules from being passed, because the reality is if they do get passed, it'll end up costing them a ton of money. And my concern is that if the FTC ends up leaving dealerships out of this rule that probably will pass sooner than later, it'll just end up kicking the can down the road further and further. Dealerships will be able to prolong the passing of these other two rules, and then eventually nothing will happen at all. The reality is that if the FTC chooses not to include dealerships in this new rule, and if they end up kicking the can down the road, which is what I fear, it is something that's going to directly hurt consumers. And it's rewarding the dealership groups that screw over their customers at every turn. Now, ultimately, only time will tell, and hopefully these rule changes will end up being implemented on sooner than later. But I'm skeptical. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.